About how far back can you trace your family?
How far back can I trace my family?
Mm-hmm.
Like 3 years old.
But I mean in terms of generations. I mean, how many generations back?
Not very far now. They're all gone.
But even when they,
when they were living, great-grandparents. I had great-grandparents on my mother's side, not my father's side.
And tell me about them, what you know about them.
My great-grandfather was a child in a slave home. His mother was an in-house slave. And his father was the landowner. And when he was 12 years old, he said he slipped away. Now that seemed to have been young, but he slipped away. And he managed to get with some fellas and managed to get all the way to Texas. He was in Alabama. He was born in Alabama.
And he made it all the way to Texas?
He made it all the way to Texas. He married at age 15 to a young lady whose daddy was also a slave owner, the black lady and the slave owner's child. And they were two real light-complected people, so consequently they were able to get through a lot of places that others couldn't. After he got to Texas, he got married, but this white father came to Texas to see how he was doing. And so he saw to it that he had a home, two-story home, and a farm, and he stayed there until he got himself started. So
the white father knew he allowed him to slip away. He knew that he was planning on leaving.
He slipped away. He
right.
He didn't know he was slipping away, but he did slip away.
But then how did his father find him?
Then he went to look for him. And found him. And saw to it that he was doing well. Well, by that time he had children. Had five children. And they were beginning to have children. So they called him, my great-grandfather, they called him Paul George, but it's hard for people to understand what you meant by Paul, because back during those days, people did call their daddy Paul. But it's hard for people now to understand what you mean when you say Paul. But they called him Paul George. His name was George, so he was called Paul George. So I said, well, maybe for people to understand what we mean, maybe we should say Papa George. But anyway, Papa George was responsible for his whole family. So my grandmother had 4 children, 3 girls and 1 boy. And my mother was the oldest. Well, she decided to get married, and she married. The man was a very intelligent man that she married, but a very jealous man. And he thought that a woman's place was in the home, in the kitchen. And my mother was above her time, ahead of her time. She didn't believe in that type of life. So consequently, he took her way back in the country, built a house back in the country, no neighbors or anything. And he would sweep the front yard each morning when he left to go to work. So if anybody came, he would know that someone had been there to see her. So she stayed with him until I was a year and a half. And she left and stayed away a while, went back, got my brother, stayed until he was 1 year. So we were like 3 and 1.5, and then she decided to leave him. So she left him.
She was a very. It sounds like she was a very unusual woman.
She was a very unusual woman. So she took us. She took us back to Paul George's house Now, in this house was the great-grandmother and great-grandfather, the grandmother and grandfather, the 3 daughters, and 5 children in this house. So consequently, my great-great-grandfather was happy, though. He was very happy to have all of his family there with him. But during that time, this was, like in 1918, the flu went around. And everybody in the family had flu but me. And the reason why I didn't have flu, they said, was that I was Miss Nice Nasty. That's what they called me. Back during those days, you could be too clean for some people. So I didn't, I wouldn't get close to anybody who had a cold. I washed my hands all the time and was very clean. So they called me Miss Nice Nasty. So everybody had the flu but me. And I was given the job of taking care of the whole household, sick people. They told me how to make potato soup. I made white potato soup, put it in cups, and took it around to everybody in the family for almost a week, they said, before anybody was able to get up and help. So that's how the name Granny came about. I took such good care of them, they said I functioned like my grandmother. So they nicknamed me Granny.